We're finally at our top 10 games of all time.
Hi, I'm Julian and this is Libby, and together we are BoxedMeeples. Well, after 4 videos, we've reached the finale, our favourite 10 board games of all time, as of 2024.
Yeah, and the moment that we were gauging them.
So, as we have in previous videos, we've each chosen our 10 favourite games. Some of them might be the same, some might be very different.
Yeah.
Some will be ranked differently according to how much we individually like them. But if we talk about any games that you think, oh, I need to get a bit into that action, a good place to go and buy them would be your friendly local game store. And our friendly local game store is Chaos Cards.
It is indeed. And if you do want to have a little online shop, then we do have a discount code in the description for you. So do check that out if you're looking at adding to your collection.
And if you've been enjoying our videos so far, why not subscribe to us? That means you'd be able to see all our videos in the future. Just click on that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications. And also, why not tell us in the comments what you thought of our favourite games of all time and if you agree with them. So, enough chat. Shall we get into this?
Let's. Who's starting?
I'll start this time.
Excellent.
You don't need expansions to play a game.
You don't.
But having had everything you could possibly get for Everdell in the complete collection, I've realised just how much I absolutely adore this game. And with the different expansions and the different components you can add to the game, every time we play it feels slightly different.
Yes.
And the different expansions we incorporate in different combinations make the gameplay entirely differently and have to adjust your strategy accordingly. Now, of course, this is essentially a tableau builder where you're building a quaint little fantasy village for your little animal friends. But there's so much more that goes on beyond that. And the scalability of this game is great for more beginner-friendly game where you just keep the base game in, to very experienced kind of board game players where you can chuck in 1 or maybe 2 different expansions, and then you've got a really thinky game with lots of things you have to really consider. This game looks fantastic on the table. Do you need a tree in the middle of the playing space? Probably not. Does it make the game a lot more fun to play? Absolutely. What really makes the game even more enjoyable are those squishy berries and the little bits of wood as you are building up your little village, going on expeditions, swimming in ponds, riding on trains, maybe doing some sort of sporting activity. Everdell's a game I really love, and every time I play it, I'm like, oh, we don't play this nearly enough, and I think that's a sign of a fantastic game.
Yeah, it's a good one. I already spoke about it earlier, so we know it's not coming up on this. It's already been on the previous video. So if you did miss that, of course, we do have our previous videos up for the whole of the top 15. If you've missed any, do go and check those out. I'm kicking off this list at 10 with a game that I absolutely adore. I mean, I adore all of these games. I don't know what I'm saying. It's Dwellings of Eldervale, and it was a game I was so excited to get. Didn't think I was going to get a copy, and so the hype was real when it arrived. And we've had it for quite a long time now, really. And it's just epic. It's so big. The game trays there with all the changeable character sides, those big massive monsters with the noisy bases which do absolutely nothing, but they add a lot to the gameplay, to the experience of it, to just how it makes you feel on the board. But what I really enjoy in this game is just the mechanics of it all and how everything comes together. You're trying to, put your little workers out on hexes, and it doesn't seem like there's much to that. Oh, that seems fine, and maybe we'll try and avoid a monster, or maybe we'll try and defeat a monster. Occasionally you can bring one to your side, which is lovely. But there's so much else to this. You're trying to get up on the tracks, you're trying to build out your cards so that when you pull your workers back, you're getting to do something with them. And that's one of the elements I really love about this game. So many games you put workers out and then what do you do with them? You sort of lose a turn bringing everyone home before you can start placing again. Whereas this one, you're actually getting stuff and being able to do things by bringing them back. And even if you lose your battles and they go off to a little sort of temporary graveyard, you still get a little something for that, which is quite nice. I love that there's different cards that you can add in, and they'll do some different bits and bobs as well. all of those unique factions are giving you slightly different abilities. Maybe your wizard can do something special. Maybe your dragon will do something different. Maybe your meeples are just, a lot better than anyone else. And it can really help that puzzle of where I can put my person, where I can get those resources, those things that I need in order to be able to get those dwellings on those meeples, which of course is the whole point of the game. Get those dwellings out, and I love that whole thing anyway. I think it was one of the first times in this game that I saw that little silicone hat, and we've seen a few more since. But yeah, just so much going on in this game. Absolutely love it. One of my faves.
Yeah, I mentioned in an earlier video, and I'm already kicking myself that it was so low, because as we've been talking about it in these videos, I realised, oh, I do really love that game. So next year, that'll be probably higher.
Maybe we table it more, it might come up on the list.
A new entry into my top 10 this year, and it's a game you've never played.
Oh,
Detective City of Angels. I love this game. Clearly, it's in my top 10. And the reason I love it is because it harks back to the kind of film noir styles that I really love.
mm-hmm.
In this game, you're investigating a crime. It's a strong narrative driven game, and all the crimes are genuinely quite interesting. So you're moving your little sleuth detective around Hollywood, around Los Angeles, collecting clues and trying to deduce who done it and why they done it. As you play different player counts, the way you do that varies as well. So you can start bribing fellow detectives with the old green stuff to get insight into what they've discovered. And you're going up against a player called the Chisel, and he's going to be trying to manipulate the game in certain ways. Are witnesses going to tell you the truth? Are they going to lie? It's up to you to try to root through those lies to find the truth and solve the crime. And it's a game that works really, really well solo as well, which is how I played it 4 times and you've never played it.
Yeah.
But I just love sitting down at the table with this big sprawling Los Angeles map in front of me, getting immersed in that kind of 1940s crime world and solving the crimes. It's such an immersive, engaging game, and I love playing it.
I think it's because you like putting your hat on.
I do like to wear a sleeve hat.
My number 9 is a real sort of comfort game for me. It's one that I'm so familiar with because we've played it so much, kind of feel like know the rules backwards. I mean, yes, there's new expansions in Lost Ruins of Arnak to the base game, but we've sort of got familiar with those too. We've played it so much that it feels like an easy play, because you don't have to think about, is this allowed, is this not allowed. It's just so easy to get to the table and play. But perhaps because of that, we haven't played it as much probably in the last 6 months. Certainly on the table, I've definitely played it a lot on BGA still, which is maybe why it's dropped slightly. But I still really love that worker placement. Then you're kind of, do you want to build a deck? Do you want to fight some guardians? Are you going up those tracks? And how can you manage all of those things to try and get yourself in the best position and see, are you going in to try and take those big pointers right at the top of the track? Which, when we first started playing the game, I was thinking, I don't know how anyone ever gets there. It's impossible. I mean, you've got so little workers, but soon you start playing this game and you realise, I can maximise this and that and the other, and you really get used to sort of honing and trying different strategies with whether you're really building your deck with the cards and how they're helping you, and you've certainly tried doing pretty much nothing but fighting with the guardians and just
didn't work well.
No, but you try these strategies and it has that to give you to keep trying. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, they've brought in new and different expansions to keep things fresh and different, to add that asymmetry to the players, and I think that really does add a lot to this game. It's one I really enjoy.
I'm not going to say much more because it's higher up in the list for me. Quite a seesaw game next for me. Was number 4, then dropped down to number 20, then to number 10, and now higher up on my list as well. Number 8 is Disney Villainous. I'm including Star Wars Villainous in that, but not Marvel Villainous. No, I wasn't playing that. I love Disney. I love Star Wars. So having a game that is entrenched in that lore, that explores different characters and has familiar and accessible mechanics is fantastic for me. I love the asymmetry of it all and how each of you and your opponents are trying to do something slightly different with the same range of actions, while also trying to dodge fate,
Yes.
where your opponents can see you're doing quite well, particularly if they know the character you're playing as. How do we stop them from achieving their goal? And the goals are all very different. So the gameplay itself actually feels very different depending on the characters you're playing. One might just be simply collecting as much power as you can, whereas others have got complicated mechanisms that involve tilting cards and collecting a whole new type of resource. The art in this game is, of course, fantastic, with custom art specifically for these games. That's in keeping with both the style of the original films, which is taken inspiration from, and also the villainous games as a whole. And when you start playing Disney villainous for a long time, it becomes familiar. That's when you can step it up to Star Wars villainous with the vehicle shenanigans that go on in that game. It's a game that can take sort of 20 minutes to play if you've got a quick character that you can achieve the goal with quite quickly, but can go on for sort of up to an hour sometimes, where you really feel like you're desperate for a certain card to come out and all your gameplay hinges on it.
Yeah, or you're really dueling each other, especially at 2 players. We've had some where we're each just on the cusp of winning, so we're just pushing each other back, and the game has gone out like that. But I mean, the majority of games were within a turn.
I was going to say, regardless of the combinations of characters you pick, it just always feels like you're one turn away from winning if your opponent beats you to it. And I think that's kind of testament to the incredible balance that it has in this game, where no matter who you're picking, you know you're going to have a tight game where the chances of winning are just as high with each character as they are with one another. So yeah, keep those expansions coming, because I cannot ever tire of playing these system of games. And yeah, whether it be Star Wars or it be Disney, I'm always about villainous.
Yeah, they were on my top 50 too. Absolutely adore these games. Next up for me is a game you discussed last video. It was in the sort of a 20s teens for you, and it's Anachrony. I've fallen in love with this game in the last sort of 6 months or so. It's been on my wish list for such a long time. I keep hearing people saying, oh, it's one of their favourites of this style of game. And I keep thinking, oh, I really want to try it. And finally, it must have been September time, I think, last year, we did get it to the table, and we were very lucky that our friends had the big box with the exosuits and all the fancy resources and everything, just couldn't get any more lux if you tried version. And even strip away all of that stuff, this is an excellent game, and I love the way that it incorporates that idea of time travel. Of course, you've got different sort of player abilities, you're all doing things slightly differently. Those exosuits, getting those out on the board and being able to take your actions there, making sure that putting in those suits you've got the correct style and type of worker to be able to do it most sort of beneficially for you, that action that you're doing. And of course, you've got those dice that you can be rolling. What if there's going to be a paradox? It adds that tension to this as well. And you've got me the exosuits for Christmas, so I'm really excited to get it back to the table here as well and get really familiar with more and more of it. Probably add a few more of the expansions to our version as well. But yeah, I really love that theme of it, just all of those actions that you're taking and trying to, not cause chaos with the timeline, but still, beg and borrow from it and have to pay back and things like that. An excellent game.
Yeah, as you said, I talked about this a lot in the last video, so check back on that to find out why I really love this and got fully lost in the theme of it all. Now, last year, this was the game of the moment, Ark Nova.
Oh.
We played it, fell in love with it. And the more we played it, the more we began to appreciate the mechanisms that go on now. So this is obviously has that fun cooldown track style system that we've seen obviously also in Civilization, and we've seen echoed in games like Disney Animated, where you're essentially choosing an action, and the longer you wait for it to build up, the better it's going to be. And these actions really feel quite diverse. So choosing when to play them and how upgraded you're going to use them greatly affects the gameplay. And obviously in this, you're taking cards from a central river and you're building up your zoo. But then it gets even more complicated because the orientation of your zoo and where you're putting certain enclosures will change as well. And you need to make sure you have those enclosures in place to be able to house the animals. But what I think is particularly fantastic about Ark Nova is that it's got this lovely conscience. You're building a zoo, of course, but on top of that, more important is environmental impacts. Going out and trying to help animals in their natural environment gets you more points. And in fact, having a really popular and successful zoo is not enough to win this game. You stand much more chance from actually going and doing that conservation and becoming, getting those points from that, because as they move around, the two different point tracks move around, but the moment they meet is the moment the game ends. And that's when the scoring happens. But again, that's a choice moment. When you're going to activate that? Because if you rush ahead, yes, maybe your opponents haven't built up their zoo in the right ways, and they're going to get minus points. Worse still, though, if you drag your heels, and they've done really well, they've upgraded all of their tiles, they've been doing excellent turn after excellent turn after excellent turn, they can just run away with the scoring before you've even had a chance to really think about your objectives that you were trying to do. Yes, the card art is questionable. I would prefer it obviously hand-drawn, but it doesn't offend me to the extent that I wouldn't ever want to play this game.
No, I don't mind it. I think
up.
it suits the theme.
And the Marine expansion that came out greatly improves it for 2 players as well, where you're cycling through those cards much, much quicker. And what a huge deck of cards that is. Enough animals there that everyone is going to be catered for, regardless of whether you like elephants or foxes.
I've already mentioned one of the sort of sibling games in Blood Rage, and this is my favourite of the 3. It's Rising Sun. Of course, we love that Japanese theme. We've mentioned it so many times. You'll see more Japanese games to come from me. But this one's a lot of fun. There's some great figures, of course, as you expect in these kind of games, and your area control. But I really like the tea ceremony and how you can really influence the game there as well. You can have someone sort of run away a little bit with it at times, and it's a shame that it doesn't really play at 2. So I do think that does restrict us from getting it played as often as perhaps we might like. But if you're wanting to sort of have a good clan battle in Japan, then this is certainly the game for that. And it's interesting how you get more cards that will help with scoring and different things. The areas score at different times. So you might start off in an area and it doesn't come up on the scoring at all. So you've got to make sure for that round that you're getting yourself to an area that is going to score, and then keep having a look on those each time you get to a new round to shuffle yourself to get the best territory that there is each time you get round to scoring. But yeah, it's one that I've had a lot of fun playing, and I can't wait to get to the table again and again.
Yes, so I talked about this in the previous video, and if you want to find out why it's important to make friends, have a watch of that.
Oh yes, the friends.
Cheers to my number 6, Viticulture from Stonemaier Games. Not my favourite Stonemaier game though, so some hints towards what's coming up in the future. But it's a worker placement game that I really, really love. And it's a more accessible, I think, worker placement game. Not the heavier end of the genre, but one that's so drenched in theme that it feels kind of instinctive what you're meant to be doing if you know about that viticulture winemaking process. It's a clever game where you are having to use your workers economically throughout the whole year because actions are tight. You have to place them out in different seasons and then commit to the season change with some of your reserve workers in place. And of course, you've got that grande worker, the big boy. And when you place him out, he can go anywhere, even if a spot has been taken, which is a tremendously clever mechanism that I can't imagine shouldn't be in every single worker placement game ever.
A few certainly do that.
There's lots of kind of approaches you can take to playing viticulture, of course. Are you going to risk it on you having your visitors? And I've heard people play it through the game and won by having certain visitors come out and using that combination and trying to maximize the point return you get from those. But a much more effective method is actually just making wine and delivering on certain orders and trying to get through those orders as quickly as possible, because then you start generating income for future turns. It looks lovely on the table, particularly as we have the miniature wine bottles, and it's a game that gets so much better with the Tuscany expansion. In fact, we would never play it now without having Tuscany expansion, because on the side of the map you've got your area control section, and then of course you've got all of the extra fun and games you have with that expansion. And if you want to take it further and say you don't like competing with each other, Viticulture World as well is a cooperative version of viticulture, which actually informs you about the kind of history of winemaking in certain different countries. So there's so much to enjoy in this game. It's relatively simple to teach, but every time we play it, it's been tight, it's been tense, and it's been exciting.
Yeah, I really enjoy the winemaking. So my number 6 is a game that we talk about quite a lot this time of year, because we do have a tradition of playing it over the Christmas period, usually Boxing Day, as it's the first time that we play the game together. I convinced you to play Rebellion for the first game that we ever played together. So we do that every year as a tradition, and we also try to play it throughout the year as well. But this game is a film in a board game, so incredibly it brings that to life. I mean, one of you's playing the rebels, one of you's playing the dark side, and it's a 2-player fight across the galaxy, with the Imperial players trying to find that rebel base and blow it up with the Death Star, and maybe a planet or two along the way. This is an incredible game.
That's why it's my number 5. So it turns out I like it that little bit more than you.
Just a tiny bit, almost a direct crossover there.
And what's fantastic about this game is it kind of feels like 2 different games melded into one, depending on which side you're playing. So the Rebels have a hard job, because as you're watching the build queue slowly move down, you've got 3 or 4 ships coming at a turn, whereas the whole Imperial army seems to be generated each turn and populating the galaxy. So you really feel like the underdogs, scraping away, trying to do individual kind of missions to gain sympathy throughout the galaxy. Whereas the Imperial player, they haven't got to do as much. All they've got to do is kind of find the rebel base and destroy it, while working out where it's going to be in the galaxy using the probe droid.
Yeah, and you're also kind of trying to gauge, what do I think that my opponent is trying to do in order to waver some points their way, because as soon as those tokens cross over, then the rebels can win. You've timed out, that's it. So if you think that they're getting sympathy in one too many areas, or if you think they're closing in on Coruscant for some unusual reasons, then you have to sort of keep an eye on what might they be trying to achieve and how can I stop that, whilst also spreading yourself around the galaxy so you can get all of those ships out in the right places, so that once you do find that base, which you've got to do quite quickly, you've also not got to just find it, you've got to have the correct amount of ships to be able to get in there and invade at the point that you do find it, before they hightail it out of there, find themselves a new base, and you're back to trying to search again. And you're always trying to sort of get extra cards from that probe deck to get through it as quick as you can.
It's a tense game. Every time you play it, it just feels like, where are the rebels? Where must they be? Why are they collecting around there? Or are they collecting there to double bluff me? You start trying to read your opponent, and you're trying to work out, well, are they thematically going for a relevant planet? Are they going to build it in Hoth because that's where it's meant to be? Or are they going to just do something wild and build it in Yoda's home?
The thematics of it.
Yeah, and you're getting to tell your own Star Wars trilogy, really. Because this could be the situation where Princess Leia gets frozen in carbonite. Or, Han Solo just turns to the dark side and suddenly he's fighting on the side of the Empire. And you've got also Luke's story progressing. You start off with slightly rubbish Luke, and then he becomes Jedi Luke, and he's almost indestructible in the galaxy. So if you know the Star Wars films, there's so many kind of slight elements in this that just hark back to those that true fans are going to really appreciate.
Yeah, it's a fantastic game. So for my number 5, it's one that you mentioned in a previous video. This is The Great Wall, and I just absolutely adore this game. I was so excited for it to arrive with all of those boxes, with everything, all of the stuff. We haven't even got through everything yet. It's I really love how it is a worker placement. You're placing them down, you're getting a resource back, but it really adds a twist in it. You have to fill those queues in order for anyone to get the resource from that area. You can't just put someone down and just take it back and, oh, that excellent, that's my turn planned. Now I've got the resources I need to do X, Y, Z. You've really got to kind of suss out your opponents and work out who else is going to be going in there. If I go in there, but are you also looking for that? Are you not? I find that element of it really interesting, and you also can build up to be able to, once one action is taken, you can then be gaining another resource with that, which is great. You can build out new clerks, which are really good at honing your abilities together and trying to get some sort of synergy between all those things that you can do. So your clan powers and those clerics that are coming in, and maybe you're going to make yourself a really good archer, which you did before, which I think we discussed in the other video. Or maybe you're all about your cavalry, or whichever it might be. You're helping yourself to become better and better and honing those skills, hopefully, if you're getting the cards quite right with that. And of course, if you do certain things and no one else is going to do that thing, might be a little bit shameful.
Shame is bad.
Shame is bad in this game, and I find it quite funny. You want to take part in this battle. Of course, there's barbarians coming towards the wall in this sort of top half of the game is a whole nother section to all this little worker placement business down the bottom half. There's a wall, you've got to defend it, you've got to make sure that the emperor is happy with your clan. But you don't need to work so hard. As long as you're taking part, you don't want to put yourself on the line too much. You just don't want to feel like anyone's going to look on you with shame. And I find that element really kind of fun and interesting. The cards that you have where you're choosing what action to take, are you working harder? Are you doing one of those other actions? And what time you choose to take those, as to whether you're going to manage being able to have enough people to be able to take advantage of that card fully. And when everyone else is having their card, so basically someone takes a turn and everyone essentially gets a follow turn for every action. So I quite like that, because it doesn't make it feel like someone's turn is going on forever and ever and ever, because you're all getting a turn on everyone's turn essentially. But then managing your resources, your people that you're sending out, so that you haven't used everyone up before it even gets round to you playing your card with all of that stuff that you've planned to do, and then it's like, oh well, nothing's emptied out, I've now got no people left to place. You've really got to manage your whole of your clan well in this game, and I really enjoy that puzzle. Yes. And the theming of it, of course.
It's a game I really love. It's what was in an earlier video.
Yeah, beautiful artwork too.
Now, this game has risen up 2 places to number 4, despite the fact I don't think we've played it in about 6 months. It's Eclipse, Second Dawn for the Galaxy.
Great game.
Evidently, I love big space epics, but in this one, it's more of a 4X style game. You're exploring the galaxy, you're expanding your empire, and ultimately, everyone else is doing the same thing, which is going to lead to conflict as you all race towards that central section of the galaxy. But what I love about this game more than anything else is the way you can tailor your fleet in all sorts of interesting and creative ways. So as you're doing your research, you're adding all sorts of different guns and weapon types and engines and shields to ships, while opponents are doing the same. Which means that eventually, when you do have the combat, you don't quite know what's going to happen. Because you might have your super-powered, armed-up dreadnought battleship ready to go, but they might have a whole fleet of individual fighters that have just so much shield and missiles and torpedoes that they're just going to get an early shot on you. I love just seeing those battles unfold, even if I'm not involved in them. And what's great about Eclipse is that you can kind of play it the way you want to. You can just explore, completely go off and just mine your own path, explore what's there and get some sort of alien technology maybe. The game itself feels kind of exciting. It's a big journey you go on. It's a big adventure that takes, 3 hours. But by the end of it, you've got stories to tell.
Hmm.
And if you feel like you've seen something exciting that's varied every time you play it because the factions have changed and different approaches have changed and even the tiles have been revealed in different orders, it feels like an epic space adventure. And that's, I think, something I like to devote a whole evening to playing
Yes.
and making a big event of it.
Yeah, and it makes me feel sort of Star Trek-y, this one, without it saying that on the tin, for sure. So my number 4, you're vying to be the next great spirit of the forest, and it's Batoku. This is a beautiful, beautiful board. Um, and some people say it looks overwhelming, but I really don't think so. It's just gorgeous art in the Batoku cards, the yokai cards, and what's going on in that board itself. It's a worker placement or a dice placement, actually. So you're putting those dice out and these different values, working out where you can best put them. Is there a building that's going to be helping you? Um, are you going to be combining your Matoma spirits with your dragonflies and going down that path? Or, I mean, there's some actual paths to take. um, Creating a path with your Batoku cards, and there's up the top, there's all the Torii gates
Yeah,
and things.
it's built in lightning
So,
track. It's great.
yeah. So there's lots going on, but the key element here is that dice placement and whether you can cross the river. And you can get in the way of your opponent. Like there can be a bit of a race to who's crossing that river first, but you sometimes want to do some other actions first. So you're kind of playing cat and mouse with each other, which I find really fun. But there's so much still to do. It's very much a point salad. There's always a good move to take. So even if your opponent does do the thing you want to do, there's going to be so much more for you to do. I really appreciate that you start the game with these end of game scoring cards, so you really know what you're aiming to do. And I like that they don't double up. So if you have a card that says you need to combine 2 dragonflies with 2 Matoma spirits and take those bonuses, and then you pick up another scoring card later and it has maybe some more dragonflies and Matoma spirits on there, you can't count those twice for each card. You have to get more of them, and putting those buildings out is really great as well. That it really changes the board and what you're managing to gain throughout your plays. But this is, as I said, a point salad, which just looks so incredible. And the expansion's now out as well, which is fantastic. Adds in these 3 modules that you can sort of add in and out of the game as and when you please. And what I really like on there are the new yokai cards that are sort of combining some of those yokai together to create these lovely combinations. So yeah, it's a fantastic game that really looks beautiful.
Yeah, I think really it's Davia's kind of masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
I talked about it in an earlier video, so if you want to hear my opinion, have a watch of that. But
Yeah.
needless to say, it's such a fantastic game.
Well, I think the popularity of that one, the sort of Komichi Saga, they've created a whole line of games, and there's even more coming out this year. I think 3 coming out in the UK that are all from that sort of Batoku storyline over generations. So a really interesting range
Lots to
there.
look forward to. It was number 1 for so long, but now it is number 3. And that's not to say I don't absolutely love Sai from Stonemaier Games, my favourite Stonemaier game, which is one of my favourite publishers. Now, in this game, I love the world building. It's not the usual kind of world that I would go for in this kind of fantasy European World War II style conflict, but I do feel immersed in that world when we play it. And obviously, each of the faction is playing asymmetrically. And also, what they're trying to achieve is going to be depending on each player, too, because there's lots of different objectives you can try and achieve. But once someone plays their 6th one out, it triggers the end game. So there is that kind of rush on achieving certain things. You can explore, of course. You can go around the map getting the encounter cards, or you can go heavy and fight with those mechs, which hopefully you've upgraded to stand a chance in the combat. And the combat itself is so exciting. I love that kind of concealing how much power you're going to invest in a battle and whether you're going to put a card in or not to kind of second guess what your opponent might be doing. I find that such a great system of resolving a conflict very, very quickly. But this game is all about the love, really, and popularity, because the more popular are, the more it's going to magnify the points you're achieving for individual objectives, and the more chance you have of winning. So it's a game that I love to play at 2. I love it more when everyone is playing it and everyone knows the game instinctively, because then it feels like a huge conflict that's going on where you don't know which direction to heading. You don't know who your biggest rival is going to be and which way is a safe route as you try to aim towards a factory to try and achieve that area control bonuses you're getting there. There's so many clever, exciting mechanisms that go on inside, and I will play it again and again and again daily if I could do.
Yeah, so will I. So I will. Hopefully, there'll be something left for me to talk about shortly. My number three, which I think is coming up for you again shortly. This is that point in the list where there is a couple of them that are so close, but it doesn't seem like we have a direct crossover here just yet. We were close with the Rebellion, not quite. This is Root, and it's a game of woodland war. Um, really asymmetric in the factions, and I think that is just the joy of this game, getting to know all of those different factions and how they really work, and how they can defeat their opponents, as you're tumbling about this woodland, taking those paths, maybe trying to convince people that they need to take the river instead, or blowing up clearings. All goes on in that woodland. I'll try not to say too much and leave you with some bits and bobs to talk about. But some factions are focused on building out buildings, some are just completing different missions, and I love that variability of not just which ones I play, but what is in play and how they all affect each other. We play it quite a bit on the app actually, but there's nothing like getting it out on the table and and going in person, particularly if you're playing some factions like the Otters. I think
Yeah.
they really benefit from being at the table, and having those kind of laughs and conversations at the table there. I'm really enjoying getting to know some of the newer factions, the Rats, the Badgers, those kind of things, and what they add in and how they work against some of those other factions, and getting to sort of hone my skill at various ones. I think I love the Woodland Alliance a lot. The Lizards can be quite fun to play for sure. And yeah, it's just a game that gives and gives and gives in terms of replayability, because it is a steep learning curve to get into it, because you do need to have someone either willing to sort of talk you through your faction and make sense of what they're doing as to why you're doing what you're doing, or I think the app is great to go
Yeah.
through in terms of teaching you the base ones and then sort of get going from there. But once you have got an idea of at least some of those factions, it gives you a grasp of the game as a whole, and you can just run with that, and it keeps things very, very interesting.
Yeah, it's my game of the year last year. It's my favourite board game. Will it be my favourite board game this year?
We'll see.
So it's not Root, it's Lost Ruins of Arnak at number 2, which
Ah.
obviously we all know what's going to be number 1. The clue was in the t-shirt all along. But let's talk about the Lost Ruins of Arnak, which I seem to love slightly more than you,
Yes,
because
yes.
I love you've talked about so much about all the great things about Lost Ruins of Arnak. There's not a lot I can add to it, but I do love the familiar nature of it that you're talking about.
Mm.
It's certainly our comfort game where we can go in and you can predict what my first turn's going to be. I know what
Oh,
your
you're
first.
going for a spearhead every single
Yeah,
time. Yeah.
but I do like how it does play differently with different Guardians coming out, even different tracks now. Where you've got, I think it's now 6 options. You can choose which track it is, and that will then affect the main game as well. And some of those tracks are very, very simple to go through. Others are going to be variable as well, if cards being placed on those, if
Yes.
individual targets you have to do. So there's kind of quite a lot of variability that goes on in the game. Obviously, which cards are coming up available and purchasable from market will adjust your gameplay accordingly. But it's a game that we just enjoy playing. It's an absolute joy to play because not only is it just familiar, but it's beautiful to look at.
Mm.
It does exactly what you want it to do, and it plays fluidly and keeps everyone involved really as you're playing it. Because, like all great worker placement games, probably my favorite genre, and this is my favorite game of that genre, getting to the spots you need to to get the benefits you want before someone else clocks onto what you're trying to do. It's kind of the key point in a worker placement game. But then having backup plans of, well, that's now gone. What can I do instead? And then the randomness of taking on the garden, the thematic elements that involves, where sometimes you go, well, I've got a gem, I've got an arrowhead. What can possibly go wrong? Oh, it's the monkey who wants lots of
the monkey.
who wants lots of gold. I haven't anticipated this at all.
4 coin on me, I just spent it on the guards.
So it's moments like that I think just make this superb, and I love the kind of the games and the films that it's referencing. You know, that sense of adventure, that kind of gung ho-ness about it, and everything about it kind of pays tribute to those films and those adventure stories. So yeah, Lost Ruins of Arnak is such an absolute fantastic board game.
So my number 2, it is also my favourite Stonemaier game, but just one pip above. We're so close on these numbers, aren't we? It's a game that we started playing just the 2 of us, and I really enjoy how it plays at 2, actually. And of course, you have lots of variability with which factions you choose when you're playing at 2. And we played the Rise of Fenris campaign together, and it was probably one of our first campaigns that we actually did from start to finish together, just the 2 of us. Really enjoyed what that brought into the game. I won't say too much for those who haven't done that, but fantastic campaign. So if you do enjoy Scythe, do head on into that and get a little story going on and add some more bits and bobs of interesting stuff to your game, for sure. I really, really love this game. It's so interesting who's choosing to do what when. You know, are you managing to monopolize when your opponents are doing something next to you that you get to, thanks, I'll take a coin. Have you just done that? Excellent. Or, you know, have you then focused on just getting those mechs out as soon as possible, and what faction you're picking, what's happened? Maybe your first encounters have managed you to do something quicker than you perhaps expected, and that every twist and turn takes you down a slightly different method of gameplay. But of course, the key thing here is to make sure you've got the money at the end of the game, because that's what's going to win it. And you're getting that by, as you mentioned, the popularity depends on how much you're going to score for that. It's not just all about just achieving those objectives and those placing those stars out. You need to have the money to back that up.
Yeah, it's so great. And I think it's worth mentioning that if you have children or family games, My Little Scythe is also absolutely superb.
Excellent. Yeah.
It distills all of the great bits of Scythe down to a kind of quicker, family-friendly game where the combat's turned into pie fights and all the events are just lovely, and how you're distributing resources, it just helps out other people to gain that loyalty and that heart. So yes.
The animals are incredible. And
fantastic miniatures in that. So yeah, if you do want a family-friendly version of Scythe, don't overlook My Little Scythe. But as you're saying, Scythe is such a superb, fantastic game.
It is.
In a surprise number 1.
Who would have thought it, right?
Gosh, shocking. I love this game. I absolutely love this game. And this game sums up everything I love about board games. I've played it hundreds of times now. I've usually got a game on the go, some sort of app with random strangers, just perfecting my abilities of different factions, or playing against friends online. But like you said, there's nothing better than getting this game to the table and seeing what happens when you mix a load of random factions together. We always play with the kind of advanced setup rules. And if we're playing at smaller player counts, the hirelings now have solved the problem of it not working at 2 players. It now works at kind of any player count. And every time we play it, I don't quite know what's going to happen. Sometimes I'll play it just to watch the world burn. I'll play with a faction that I know isn't going to win, but I want to be the vagabond who blows up a clearing. Or I want to be the otters who get to do the wheeler dealing. Particularly, obviously, as you're saying, in person, because they don't work online at all, where you can't say, oh, I can't have a notice. You want to get on my boat? Give me some cards. Obviously, the Woodland Alliance are the best faction. Everyone loves playing as those because
you won with the cats the other day.
Well, so the easiest faction to learn is obviously the cats. because it's the most familiar, I think, and echoes different board game mechanisms, but hard to win with, and I won. So that felt victorious. Or it can be obviously the eerie and trying to have that tension of is my cards going to play out this turn, or am I going to go into turmoil, or just be the brave badgers. Every time you play this, it feels different depending on the combinations of factions. And yes, you're absolutely right. It's a pain to learn. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. You have to learn to be competitive, not just your faction, but what everyone else is trying
Yeah,
to
but
do.
I don't think you need to, like, it's a fun game to play anyway. Like, do you need to be going in to win in your first few games? You can have fun in that woodland and just see what happens. I mean, I made some terrible mistakes in my game with the Eerie the other day. I went into turmoil way too many times. But then I thought, there's a domination card here. See what happens. So you can always just see if you can just end up in the few matching clearings.
Well,
See what happens.
we all know the key thing when you're playing Root is getting to that dignity, is getting 15 points and having a dignified game, because that is what you're all really striving for,
Yeah.
just to be dignified in that woodland. I can't get enough of Root. I will play this every chance I get. I will suggest it every chance I get. And if all of these board games suddenly vanished and I was left with Root, I would still be happy, because I love the game
So things
just that much. So
you are aware that nobody else knows what dignity is, right?
it's going to be in the rule books eventually.
No.
That just getting 15 points counts as dignity.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't imagine a game coming along that tickles my pickle quite in the same way that Root does. Love the whole theme of it all. There's woodland war going on. I love the art of it, particularly now Meeples match up with the game art. Love Root, and I can't say enough good things about it.
Do you love Root?
Kind of love it.
So it's me for the last one, for my number one, and of course it stayed the same.
In a
as
surprise to no one.
Yeah, I just couldn't let this one drop off of that top spot. I think Yado's an incredible game. Again, your worker placement, but there's so much going on. There's so much to think about. Those missions that you're going on, whichever color they are, they get harder and harder. If you manage to do those black missions, it's incredible. But you're trying to achieve so much all at the same time, and you're trying to set up 2 or 3 other missions while still achieving something each turn to be able to get that prestige that you need. And it is set in old world Japan. Who knew? And I love playing it with the specialists. Particularly, we have the deluxe master set, and it does allow the geishas to be able to do a special action. The ninja is so key to be able to get to places where the watchman's going to be potentially arresting you, but obviously he's stealth. He's in his black outfit. No one can see him. So he can just sneak in there and get you that weapon from the shop that you need, perhaps. Or I like that you can trade for the different resources that you need. So you have opportunities. If you haven't won what you want in the bidding phase, you can go out into town and get it. It might be more expensive, but the opportunity is there to get it. You can even steal from the church. And one thing that I really love in this game is all of the thematics in those mission cards. If you read the flavor text on them, which I love to do when we play, I think it really draws you into what's happening in the game. And you've found out that the clan leaders have been doing some very dodgy things with the local geishas, which maybe aren't such high class ladies, or perhaps you've been sent off to kidnap the other clan leader's son because they've done you an injustice of some way, and you need to enact your revenge. There's so much story and different things going on in the town, the city that is there. And if you get a black mission and you manage to kill the shogun, it's so difficult to do. So the chance of you getting everyone just where you need it and all those resources together perfectly, just gives such a sense of achievement, and it finishes the game, because it's that key, that you're going to be further into the game before you're even able to kind of think about it. But if you do manage to achieve that, that's amazing. And we've got the lovely coins for it. It's just incredible the way the events change everything each round. There's so much happening. So
Yeah.
it's wonderful.
So I've talked about it in an earlier video. I absolutely love this game too. But yeah, it's no surprise it's your number one. I think it's
It brought me into the hobby proper in the old version back, 12-ish probably years ago. I can't remember the date of the original one. A friend got that version and we played it loads because absolutely loved it. And then you couldn't really get it. The more games I was playing, I couldn't find it anywhere. And then of course the deluxe version came out, and we've been doing these videos and things like that, so I've been able to play it more. And it's just one that has so many great memories, but it's still one that I will never say no to pulling that off the shelf.
So that's been our top 50 board games of all time for 2024.
Yeah.
Let us know in the comments what you thought.
Yeah.
Was there a single surprise in our top 10 at all, or had you predicted them before we even said what they were? Do let us know in the comments down below.
There was a few new entries this year, so there is a bit of a mix-up for sure in the whole of the top 50. Of course, if you haven't seen the rest of the 50, do jump back and check the other numbers out and see how our chase has sort of developed up into this top 10.
But what would be your number one? Do let us know down below in the comments. And once again, subscribe if you haven't already.
Yes.
Thank you so much for watching this series of videos. It is always a joy to do this each year, so look forward to one again next year. And as always, thanks so much for watching.
Yeah, see you next time. Bye.